My name is Lorraine. I'm 62, and I've always been the kind of woman who settles things quietly, not scandalously. I was a single mother, a widow since I was 34. I raised my son with my own hands, cooking in public schools, spending sleepless nights so he never lacked anything. But there's one thing that no one has ever taught me. What do we do when it's our own child who disappoints us? Have you ever tried to surprise someone and ended up discovering something that he preferred not to know? Something that took you off your feet, made you review every hug, every sacrifice, every memory with that person? Today I'm going to tell you how a simple apple pie led me to the biggest shock of my life. I just wanted to see my son smile. I just wanted to make a treat, to be noticed. I hid in his car to give him a surprise, the kind that mom makes with affection. But when he came in, he did not enter alone. And what I heard, there, sitting and invisible in the back seat, tore my soul. What was supposed to be a gesture of love became the deepest wound I have ever carried. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know something. What I heard in that car was not just an ordinary conversation. They were words that cut me inside, as if each syllable erased a piece of what I had been for more than 30 years. I thought I was going to see my boy smile. I thought he was going to be moved by the apple pie that I took with so much affection. But she got into the car, his wife, and the first thing she said was, "Are you sure no one will suspect you?" From then on, I knew that nothing I thought about my family was real. Now, before I continue telling this, I wanted to ask you something. If this story is already touching your heart, if you understand what it's like to be too good and end up forgotten, click on the like button, subscribe to the channel. I'm not an actress. I'm just a lady telling the truth of my life. And maybe yours too. What I experienced hurt too much, but if there's someone out there who listens to me, maybe, just maybe, I'll be able to breathe again. It was a clear afternoon in Mount Pleasant, one of those that seem calm on the outside, but hide storms inside us. I had left home early, with the apple pie still warm inside the blue box I always used on special occasions. Aaron loved that pie since he was little. When he went through difficult days in high school, that's what I did. When he lost his first job too. That was my way of saying, "I'm here, son. I am still your port." And that day, I just wanted to make him smile. I saw his car parked under a huge tree behind the law office. The light gray sedan was there, clean, with the windows slightly down because of the heat. I approached smiling. It was as if my heart was cotton at that moment. I opened the back door carefully, crouched inside, placed the pie box on the bench next to it, and closed it. I stayed there, crouched down, hidden as someone preparing a good prank. And I swear, I laughed to myself. It looked like a child preparing an innocent game. The smell of the car brought back memories. His perfume was still the same as the one I gave him as a gift a few Christmases ago. I remembered the first time I saw Aaron wearing a suit, the day he invited me to see the new office, the pride I felt. But then, I heard footsteps. First, masculine steps, the shoe that drags a little as he has always walked. Then, jumps, women's heels. The driver's door opened, and Aaron stepped in, but not alone. The passenger door opened too, and she was the one who entered, Emily. I almost smiled. I thought, oh, that's good. They came together, but that smile faded the moment she opened her mouth. "Are you sure no one will suspect you?" It was as if someone threw ice on my back. Aaron had a short laugh. "Of course not. She is forgetful. She keeps stumbling over things. No one will be surprised." My body froze. Emily continued, "The stairs are old. Just loosen the screws a little and leave the mat loose. A slip. A fainting. It's over." I felt my throat close. The air in the car became heavy. I tried to understand. Was that a joke? Was it a horrible joke? But the two continued as if they were talking about something ordinary. "And the policy?" Emily asked. $150,000 if she dies at home. I've already checked. "Is the house in her name?" "It's still okay, but we'll solve it in the inventory. Paul has already spoken to the lawyer. Everything is ready." Swamp, my brother, my blood. That's when I understood. That was not an outbreak. It was not an exaggeration. That was real. I listened to everything without moving. My hands trembled, but I forced myself to stand still. The sound of the heart pounding in my chest was the only thing that kept me alive at that moment. They were planning my death. With coolness. Take it easy. With details. Emily talked about the sale of the house, said she knew a broker who sells fast so it doesn't smell. He used those words. Smell. As if my entire story, the 34 years I lived there, were just dust and mold. Aaron said he wanted to keep the facade, that he would continue to visit me until the thing happened, that it was better this way to not arouse suspicion. And I was there, sitting in the back seat, invisible. They continued talking for a few more minutes, laughing, exchanging details about dates, plans, insurance. Then they got out of the car and entered the building, as if nothing had happened. I don't know how long I stood there after they left. My eyes were full of water, but I didn't cry. There was something greater than pain holding back my tears. Incredulity. At what point did my son lose me? What kind of people has he become? Was it really mine? Or was everything I believed in just an illusion I created to survive? You know, sometimes we do so much for others. Who forgets to take care of us? And when the truth comes out, the heart breaks in a place that cannot be repaired. If you've ever experienced pain like this, if you've ever trusted someone too much who turned their backs on you, comment below. It says I've lived it, or just it touched me. I will read every word as if receiving a hug, but don't think it ends here. What they didn't know is that I heard everything, and from that moment on, I stopped being just the mother, and I became the woman they were going to fear the most. I was still there, curled up in the back seat of that car, my whole body frozen, when I heard my own son laugh, a low, mocking laugh. And then, as if commenting on the weather or traffic, he said, "She's forgetting everything. He has already left the gas on twice. No one will find it strange if a 62-year-old lady falls down the stairs and hits her head." Those words cut me more than if he had slapped me. And the worst, it's just that he spoke so naturally, as if he were describing some day-to-day task. Emily, her voice as cold as the marble of the tomb where they wanted to put me, replied, "It's past time for her to leave. Her world doesn't even exist anymore." I felt like I was an old piece that no one else wants to keep around. And at that moment, my mind was filled with images that kept repeating themselves. I remembered the times Aaron had bouts of bronchitis, and I spent whole nights sitting next to him, with a bowl of hot water and a wet cloth, inhaling eucalyptus because we couldn't afford a nebulizer. I remembered when he broke his arm playing ball, and I sold my wedding ring to pay for the x-ray. I found myself washing his uniform by hand, at dawn, with my fingers stiff from the cold, because the machine had broken down, and I couldn't buy another one. I remembered the days when I worked twice as hard, alternating between school and a restaurant downtown, to save money for college. He wanted to study in Atlanta. He wanted to get out of the city, and I wanted him to have what I never had. I bought used books, sent him frozen food by bus, sent letters with $10 inside, even when I had nothing to eat myself. At Christmas, even without money, I decorated the house with colored paper and put a lit candle in each window so that he knew that, no matter where he was, he would always have a home waiting for him. Now, sitting in the front seat of that car, he described me as a burden, a woman who had no memory, fragile, disposable. Emily also made a joke saying that you don't even need to push, just leave the ladder the right way. And Aaron laughed. He laughed. And that laugh was what destroyed me the most. Because there it was no longer just a betrayal. It was contempt. It was mockery. As if the love I gave was a joke. As if my entire existence were a reason for mockery. And I was there. Hooray. Listening. Present. Invisible. They forgot that a mother listens to what no one says. What a mother feels, even what she doesn't see. While they were talking, I saw the image of little Aaron, lying on my lap, saying, "Mom, don't let me die," in the crises of shortness of breath. I remember replying, "Never. As long as I breathe, you will live." And today, he planned the opposite. Erase me. Eliminate me. Shut me up forever. There were no words, inside or outside of me, to explain that. Only pain. But also, in the depths of all this, something began to be born that I had long forgotten. Strength. A strength that does not come from anger, but from disappointment. A strength that only those who have lost everything can feel. And I, there in that car, realized they thought I was getting weak. Little did they know what I was still capable of. I left there different. It was no longer the mother who took pie. It was the woman who would return home with a plan. But first, I needed to know. Who else was part of this? Who else was seeing me as easy prey? Because what lay ahead? It would require me to be cold-blooded and an impeccable memory. I thought that nothing else could hurt me beyond what I had already heard. But I was wrong. In the middle of the conversation, when I was already trying to control the trembling of my hands and the lump in my throat, I heard Emily mention another name, a name that hurt me in a different way. Sarah, my sister-in-law, my brother Paul's wife. The only one in the family who still sent me a birthday card, even if only with a ready-made sentence. Emily said matter-of-factly, "Sarah has already spoken to her lawyer. He will take care of the inventory as soon as the death certificate comes out." It was like taking another blow to the stomach. I could hardly believe it. So that was it. It wasn't just my son. It was my blood, my brother, the Paul who grew up with me sharing a blanket in an old trailer. Paul who said that I was the strongest woman he knew, after our mother. That Paul was now waiting for my death, as if waiting for a deposit to fall into the account. And not just waiting, he was helping to accelerate. A Sarah, the one who called me soul sister at Christmas, already had a lawyer ready, as if I were an old piece of furniture that they already knew where to put it after I left. Emily also added, "He said that the process will be fast, even more so if there is no new will." Aaron agreed. He said that she has never changed a thing since Robert died. I trembled. He trembled with anger, sadness, shame. I didn't know if my heart would take it, but I did. I endured it because, deep down, a voice inside me began to whisper, "Look, Lorraine, look who's on your side, and who's pushing you into the abyss." When they got out of the car, laughing, not knowing that the death they were planning was alive and listening to everything, I waited a few more minutes. I got up carefully, left slowly, looking around, and walked to the bus stop. I sat on the wooden bench, holding the pie box, now cold and meaningless, as if it were an urn with the ashes of my dignity. The return home was long. Every street seemed darker, even with the sun outside. Every face I saw through the bus window seemed distant. And when I arrived, I leaned against the front door calmly, took off my shoes, and walked into the living room. I sat in the armchair I bought when Aaron entered college, the faded blue one, and stood there, motionless. I didn't cry. The pain was too deep to turn into tears. It was as if I was being erased in silence. The worst loneliness in the world is when you realize that no one in your own family would care if you died. And at that moment, everything was clear. They no longer saw me as a mother or a sister. They saw me as an amount, a value, a piece of paper, a house key that would soon pass by hand. I stood there for hours, listening to the ticking of the clock on the wall, the same one Robert had installed before leaving. It was as if time was saying, "Wake up, Lorraine. They want to erase you, but you still breathe." And that's when I got up. Because if I was still alive, so they still had something to fear. But before any reaction, I needed to know, how far did this network of betrayal spread? Who else, among those who called me family, was ready to bury me standing up and smile at the funeral? When I returned to my home in West Ashley, it seemed as if every wall was watching me with a heavy silence, as if everything there knew before I did what was about to happen. I closed the door slowly, rested my hand on the frame as if I had to hold on to keep from falling, and let the air go deep into my lungs. The room was exactly as I left it in the morning. The old radio turned off, the blanket folded on the sofa, the teacup still with edge marks. Everything so simple, so mine, and at the same time, so threatened. I walked up the stairs, the ladder that Robert built with his own hands when Aaron was only 6 years old. I remember it as if it were now. Robert smiling as he sanded the wood, saying that he wanted something firm, safe, that would last for many years because our boy deserves to go up to his room without fear of falling. His hand was big, strong, and I loved to see the way he held each piece, as if he were taking care of something sacred. Today, those same boards that he arranged with so much affection were being mentioned as a weapon, as a path to my death. I sat on the top step, as I used to do when Aaron came home from school. He always ran up and threw himself on my lap, asking for macaroni and cheese. The memory came so vivid, so whole, that my chest tightened. It was there that I realized. It was not just the pain of their plan. It was the pain of what no longer existed. The pain of the boy I let grow up thinking that he would carry my memory with love. I walked to the kitchen. The wooden table still had a burnt mark from the day Aaron tried to make pancakes himself. I was in the backyard, and when I entered, he was desperate, thinking he had ruined everything. I hugged him and said that it didn't matter, that it was just proof that he was trying to learn. Today, that boy spoke of me as if I were a broken object. I touched the counter, ran my fingers over the sink, opened the drawer where I keep the embroidered dish towels. One of them, the apple one, was the one I used when I made the pie that day. It was Aaron's favorite cloth. He said that the smell of embroidery mixed with apple was the smell of home. I swallowed. I was still the same woman who held that cloth, but he was no longer the same boy who grew up under my roof. I went to the living room and sat on the couch, the same couch where, when Aaron was little, we watched Mr. Rogers. He would lie with his head on my lap, and I would run my hand through his hair while he said, "One day I'm going to be a good person, Mom." I remember the thin voice, the sincere look, and I wondered, where did that child go? At what point did the world take from him everything I tried to put in? Or was it that it was never there, and I was the one who saw what I wanted to see? The whole house seemed to whisper memories. The runner where Aaron learned to ride a wheeled bike. His room, where I made the first crochet blanket. The backyard where I buried his dog when he was 10 years old and cried more than he did. Everything so full of life, and now turned into a target. I got up slowly, because the pain wasn't just emotional. It was physical. It was a weight on the bones. I went to the bedroom. I opened the door. The bed made, as always. The photo of Aaron baby still in the frame. I should have taken this picture off the bookshelf years ago, but I never had the courage. It was the last memory of the time when he still saw me as a safe haven. I sat on the edge of the bed and took a deep breath. The air came in cold, heavy. I realized that everything I had built, every gesture, every sacrifice, was being thrown away like garbage, and not by strangers, for my own family. The silence of the house became a living, almost pulsating thing, as if asking me, "What now, Lorraine? What are you going to do with this truth?" And there, in that room, with the picture of my boy looking at me, I realized that I was not a weak woman. I was a wounded woman, and wounded women learn to survive. Before continuing the story, let me tell you something. I'm here opening my heart, turning over memories that I didn't even want to touch, but that I need to tell to take this weight off my chest. If you're listening to me, if this story reaches you in any way, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. I still have a lot in store to tell you, and your presence here helps me to move on. And it was in this mixture of longing and despair that I realized something even more serious, something that would turn that pain into a decision. Because that night, when I faced everything I built, I understood that the worst was yet to come. The next morning, I got up before the sun even rose. The house was still asleep, but my heart was already awake. I didn't make coffee. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't open the curtain. I just sat on the edge of the bed with my feet on the cold floor and took a deep breath. That was the first morning of my new life. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to confront. I wasn't going to cry in front of anyone. My pain was going to become flat. If they thought I was forgetful, fragile, or easy to deceive, they would discover over time the kind of memory a mother has when she smells death haunting. I put on my simple clothes, tied my hair back, and went straight to the bench. The manager, a sweet-voiced girl named Catherine, attended me with her usual polite look. I asked to see the recent accesses of my account. She hesitated a little, then called me to a private room. There was an attempt to access Aaron's name online, but the lady hadn't authorized it, so the system blocked it. My heart tightened, but I didn't show it. I just smiled with the corner of my mouth and thanked her. It was just another confirmation of what I already knew. They didn't just want me dead. They wanted everything tidied up before her. From there, I went to Bill's house. Bill McAllister, the former Charleston police detective, now retired, widower, and owner of 3 skittish cats. I met Bill when he was my sister's neighbor, and since then, we have maintained a lukewarm friendship, made up of few words and a lot of observation. When I knocked on his door, he looked at me as if he already knew something was wrong. "Coffee?" he asked. "Later," I said, and I told everything. Every word heard in the car, each name mentioned, every shot whispered. Bill didn't interrupt. He could only listen, with his eyes narrowed and his hands clasped between his knees. When I finished, He got up slowly and went to the bedroom. He came back with a small box. "This still works. Places on top of any furniture, records up to 8 hours. If you need more, let me know." I picked up the tape recorder like someone holding a gun. My body was the same, but my soul was already different. I returned home slowly, observing everything with new eyes. The living room rug, the ladder, the windows, the doorbell. I needed to turn my home into a test. I installed the recorder behind a frame. The next day, I put another one hidden inside the sewing box in the kitchen, and I started waiting. Aaron showed up 2 days later, alone. It brought cheap flowers and a feigned smile. "I stopped by just to see how you're doing, Mom." I opened the door, gave him a kiss on the cheek, and invited him in, with the same voice as always. I served tea, offered cookies, as if nothing had happened. But I watched, his sweaty hands, the eyes that avoided mine, the way he looked discreetly at the stairs, then at the kitchen wall. I was mapping, as if that visit were an inspection. I let him talk. I only listened, and I recorded everything. In the following days, I went to the market as usual, walked around the neighborhood, talked to Donna Maureen, who never knows anything, but loves to repeat what she heard. And it was from her that I heard, "Your brother Paul has been asking if you are in good health. He said he was worried about his pressure." My pressure, which has always been low. I smiled and thanked him, but inside I just thought, one more piece on the board. At home, I opened the computer and logged into my old Facebook account, which I hardly used anymore. And there, in my inbox, I found what I didn't know I was looking for. A conversation between Emily and Paul, exchanging messages about the right time, about avoiding mistakes, about leaving no trace. Some deleted sentences, but the parts that remained were enough. I stared at the screen as if facing an abyss. They were really doing it, the whole family, like a sick hive. I then began to write everything down, with date, time, place, every visit, every link, every sentence. I bought a new notebook just for that, and he wrote everything as if he were assembling a puzzle with his own hands. Silence has become my tool. I became a shadow within my own life, and the quieter I became, the more they talked. More confident, more disingenuous. Emily once called saying she was worried about me alone in that huge house. He suggested that I move. Where to? We can get a quiet caretaker place near Greenville. Clear. Near her house. Easier to control. I said I would think about it, that I would appreciate it. And once again, I recorded everything. Because now, my mission was not just to survive. It was to keep their every step, every move, every lie. Because one thing I knew, whoever arms against the blood that gave his life does not stop until he gets what he wants. But what they forgot, it's just that a woman like me only looks fragile on the outside. Inside, we have iron instead of veins. And when I decided to fight back, I realized that I wasn't alone in this story. There was someone from the past who was going to reappear with information that would change everything. Can you imagine who? Because even I was scared when I saw who knocked on my door that night. That night, when everything finally fell silent. No phone ringing, no footsteps on the sidewalk, no street noise. I went to the bathroom, closed the door, and turned on the dim light in the mirror. And there, in the blurry reflection of the old frame, I saw myself whole. I stopped pretending, even to myself. The face that stared at me was that of a tired woman, the wrinkles deeper than I remembered, the dark circles under my eyes, as if each one carried the names of those who disappointed me. Her hair thins and ties up anyway, as if she had given up on herself a long time ago. I approached, very slowly, and looked into my own eyes, those eyes that have already seen childbirth, burial, miracle, pain, abandonment, those eyes that cried alone in the room while telling everyone that everything was fine. And I thought, if I don't take care of myself now, no one else will. If I tell what I heard, if I tell someone what they are doing, they will say that I am delirious, that I am confused, that I am no longer the same. They will laugh, medicate me, isolate me. So no, I wasn't going to ask for help, nor cry out for love. The time to beg has passed. I was going to survive with what I had left, a cool head and a heart that has already learned to be beaten in silence. And that's when I started to act. I went to my room, opened the third drawer of the dresser, and counted my savings. each note kept with years of care, each penny separated from the change of purchases. I called the safe store downtown and asked for a small, portable, but sturdy model. "You don't need to come and install. I can handle it myself." I kept the money, documents, the old will, and the copy of the insurance policy. Everything they wanted to control was now hidden where not even time would find it. The next day, I went to the bank again. He said he wanted to redirect life insurance. Catherine looked at me surprised. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. I looked firmly into her eyes. "I do. I want it to go to a closed fund. No beneficiary until further notice. It only releases by my password. And I want a new testament, with a lawyer from outside." She hesitated, then nodded. And there, another rope was cut. I changed my passwords. All. From the bank, from the email, from the electricity bill. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I owned myself. Because when we love too much, we give everything. And he doesn't even realize it. But at that moment, I decided no one else was going to know where I keep the keys to my life. The silence inside me was now a choice. An armor. Sometimes, the only way to survive is to stop trying to be understood. I looked at myself in the mirror one more time before going to sleep. I touched my own face. And I thought, "Lorraine, you have already been a lot to many people. Now it's time to be everything to you. Because what is coming, my daughter, is the kind of turning point that only those who listen to the end will understand. And I promise, you don't want to miss what I still have to reveal." But before the sun rose again, someone unexpected left a message on my door. And when I read that note, I realized that I had never been so close to the truth. That morning, after reading the note left under the door, handwritten in trembling handwriting, saying only, "You are not alone. Be careful who signs for you," I knew it was time to make the first cut. Dry cut. Root cutting. No more plans made only on paper or promises whispered in the dark. I arrived at the bank with the same simple clothes as always, and a look that, this time, did not deviate from anyone. I went to Catherine, asked for a closed room, and said, without trembling my voice, "I want to remove my son from the account, as a contact, as authorized, as everything. He no longer answers for me, only me." She didn't ask why. He just nodded, typed, confirmed, and then looked at me with that mixture of respect and surprise. His name disappeared from the screen as if he had never been there, and in that moment, something inside me broke free. It was as if I had taken a leash off my own neck. From there, I went straight to the office of the lawyer Bill had pointed me to, a man named Harold, over 80 years old, and with a voice so still that it sounded like a grandfather telling a story. I told him what I needed, without giving too much detail, just enough for him to understand that a woman was putting the reins of her own life in her hands. "I want to make a new testament. The house no longer goes to my son, not even for my brother. I want to donate everything to that NGO of single mothers in Colombia, the one that takes care of abandoned women with young children. They know what it's like to be alone. They will value it." Harold looked at me for a few seconds, then just said, "Are you sure?" I smiled, with a peace that even I didn't know I had. "I've never had so much. We fill out the papers." I signed everything right there. From that moment on, my house ceased to be a promise of inheritance and became a legacy. A home built with love, which would go to other women who, like me, learned to raise children between tears and prayers. But I didn't stop there. I also redirected life insurance. All the amount now went to the same foundation. No intermediaries, no loopholes. If something happened to me, they would receive it. They, and not those who today planned my downfall. I left there with the documents in my bag and my head held high. You know, when we start to protect ourselves, the pain is still there, but it is accompanied by a force that scares even ourselves. It is as if the soul said, "It took a while, but you woke up." And I wanted to open a parenthesis here, if you allow me, because there is a kind of pain that only those who have been left aside by those who created it can understand, who has loved so much that he has forgotten himself, and when she realizes, she's alone, with nowhere to run. If you've ever felt that, comment below. He says, "I know how it is," or just, "I understand you." Sometimes a word like that saves an entire day. After that, I made an appointment with a doctor. I did tests. Everyone. Blood, heart, pressure, memory. I wanted to put on record that I'm fine, that I'm lucid, that I'm alive, body and soul, That if anything happens to me, it wasn't time. That was the intention. The doctor gave me the reports, all with good results. I put it in an envelope, kept it in the new safe, and made copies for Bill. A silent, discreet, but fatal dossier. And for the first time in a long time that night, I slept with the door locked and my heart less tight. They didn't know it yet, but the ground beneath their feet, it was already starting to crack. And what would they do when they found out that the will had changed? That the money is gone? That I, the forgotten old woman, was 2 steps ahead? Would Aaron still smile when he found out who I left everything to? Because the next meeting we had, everything changed. And it wasn't on my couch. It was in a place where no lie can hide. Can you imagine where? I woke up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, as if someone had put their hand inside my chest and squeezed it hard. The house was dark, quiet, but inside my head still echoed the noise of the fall, the dry sound of my body hitting the steps, and above all, Aaron's laughter, distant, mocking, as if he were a boy making mischief. I sat on the bed without air, with my shirt stuck with sweat, and for a few seconds I didn't know where I was. I put my hand to my chest, took a deep breath, and tried to get back to myself. It was just a dream, but the feeling, that part was too real. I got up slowly, without turning on the light, and walked around the house like a shadow. I ran my hand over the furniture, the paintings, the wood of the kitchen table that Robert sanded so carefully. It was as if I was saying goodbye to every corner, to every memory, as if I were already a ghost visiting my own life before leaving for good. In the living room, I stopped in front of the stairs, the ladder that my husband built, step by step, so that our boy could climb safely. I touched the handrail as if touching an open wound, and in that instant, the pain came in one piece. The house became too small, too quiet, too heavy. I knelt on the mat where Aaron sat to play with the cars, where I told stories, where I slept so many nights waiting for him to come home from high school when he sneaked out. That carpet carried my whole life, and it was there, sitting on the cold ground at dawn, that I cried for the first time since the day I heard my name discussed, as if it were a problem to be solved. I didn't cry out loud. I didn't cry beautifully. I cried the way that only tired women understand, the body shaking, the face warm, the heart asking to die for a moment just to be able to rest. I cried for everything I did, from what I gave, for what I lost, for the love that became a weapon, for the son who would become my tormentor if he could. I cried for myself, for the Lorraine that I was. It is for Lorraine that I had to turn. I don't know how long I stayed there. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. But when the silence changed, and the first lights of the morning began to ring the window, I felt something else born inside me. Something that wasn't anger, nor sadness. It was firmness. The same firmness I had when I buried Robert and had to get out of bed the next day because Aaron had to go to school. The same firmness that I had when I worked twice as hard to pay for his college. The same firmness that I thought I had lost, but that was always quiet, waiting for me. I got up slowly, still with moist eyes, and went to the bathroom to wash my face. The cold water brought back the woman I needed to be. I looked at myself in the mirror, and for the first time since it all began, I didn't see a victim. I saw someone who had plenty of reason to fight, and I know it sounds weird, but in that moment, so small, so silent, I knew exactly what I had to do. It wasn't running away. It wasn't begging for love. It was not waiting for death. It was something else. Something that was going to turn this story upside down. Something that would make every betrayal of theirs come back like an echo. And when the sun finally came through the kitchen window, warming the floor where I cried so much, I already had a plan. A plan that no one, not Aaron, not Emily, not Paul, not Sarah, could have foreseen, because they thought I was going to fall down the stairs, but they never imagined what I would do before that. And now I ask you, do you think they were ready to find out that the silent old woman wasn't that easy to take down? Because in the next part, that's where everything starts to turn. That morning, I woke up different. It was as if the pain was still there, but with a different face. A face that no longer paralyzed me, guided me. The tear dried up, but the heart did not. I got up with the calm of someone who knows exactly where he will step. I wore my clothes as one who wears armor. I prepared the coffee with the same gestures as always, but my head was no longer in the kitchen. It was in the next steps. Because at that point, I was no longer just the betrayed woman. I was the woman they underestimated, and that gave me an advantage they didn't know I had. I called Bill, and we arranged to meet at the old disused restaurant where he used to have lunch with his police colleagues. A discreet place, away from the radar of prying eyes. I got there with a notebook in my hands and my soul on my feet. We sat in silence, and he began to review the recordings with me. This is what you have, Lorraine. It's serious. Insurance fraud, conspiracy to murder, misuse of banking information. This is a federal crime. He looked at me with a respect that didn't fit on the table. They're not just trying to take advantage, they're trying to wipe you off the map. I took a deep breath and just said, then let's record everything. Bill advised me not to confront, not to change the routine abruptly, not to provoke reactions. You're already ahead. Now you just need to let them sync with their own steps. I returned home with a plan in my head. In the same week, I bought 2 small, almost invisible cameras. I installed one in the frame of the hallway that led to the kitchen, and another in the living room lamp, with a wide view of the stairs, exactly the place they planned for my accident. I also installed a third one outside, disguised between the vases on the balcony, facing the main entrance. The house became a silent fortress. Everything looked the same, but now every move left a trace. Aaron called 2 days later, saying he would stop by to see how I was. The tone of his voice was the same as always, sweet and false as vanquished honey. I smiled on the phone, accepted the visit, and left the door ajar. When he entered, I noticed how he looked around. His eyes were not looking for my health. They were looking for my weakness. He commented from the stairs, casually, "Have these old steps ever been a problem, Mom? The other day I thought about calling someone to renovate. I wrote this down in the notebook, along with the date, the time, the tone of voice. Afterwards, Emily sent a message asking if I had already solved the house documents. I said I wanted to help, that it was important to keep everything in order for my good. Ah, my daughter. It was never for my sake. I also registered. Print, date, email saved in encrypted folder. Paul called next. He said he was thinking of stopping by with Sarah to see if you need anything. I replied that I didn't need to, but that the coffee would always be ready. And so, I let them come, each one in turn, each one thinking that I was where I had always been, weak, old, alone. Little did they know that I could see everything, that I heard everything, that silence was now my shield and my attack. At night he watched the recordings, sometimes alone, sometimes with Bill, who would tell me, "You're doing the right thing. You're protecting what's yours." He helped me organize everything in chronological order. Audios, images, prints, a complete dossier, impossible to deny, unquestionable. Sometimes while I was writing everything down in the kitchen, I found myself thinking, how did we get here? How does love turn this around? When does blood become a threat? And if you've ever been through something similar, if you've ever felt the ground shake inside your own house, leave your comment here. He writes, "I agree," or just, "It's true," because sometimes, knowing that someone understands what we have experienced, it's the only thing that gives me the strength to continue. And look, if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Each day I acted more precisely. My footsteps didn't make noise, but they made history. And now that all the pieces were moving, there was only one thing left, to give them their first scare. A small, subtle jolt, but one that made them feel that something was about to get out of control. And that's exactly what I did. At Sunday dinner. Can you imagine what I revealed at that table? Because even Emily's fork fell to the ground when she heard it. The house was silent, as I liked. Just the ticking of the clock on the wall, and the sound of the pencil scratching the paper. Sitting at the kitchen table, Bill and I organized everything. Every doctored statement, every hidden recording, every message they thought would never be read by me. That wasn't just paper. It was the map of truth. Bill, meticulous, drew a timeline with dates, times, names. This banking access matches the day Emily said you needed more rest. Remember? I remembered. Each line of hers had a subtle venom. And now everything was there, revealed like a web. It was no longer just what I felt. That's what they did. Proof by test, the net was set up, and they did not even suspect it. In silence, Bill made a discreet phone call to his former partner at the Charleston County Sheriff's Office, a trusted man who had worked with him for nearly 20 years. He did not give names. He only told what was happening. An elderly lady, alone, the victim of a conspiracy on the part of her own family. "Keep an eye out, that's all," he asked. And the other replied, "Leave it to me." I returned home with a cold in my back and a warmth in my chest. We were messing with fire, but I knew, from the bottom of my soul, that it was the only way out. From then on, my every gesture would be a movement on the board, and I was going to play calmly. The first step was to call Harold, my lawyer, and ask for an official copy of the New Testament. "Just to keep it with me," I said. "Something will happen, right?" He didn't question it. He delivered it to me days later, sealed, with a notarized signature and everything in place. When I held that envelope in my hands, I felt like I had recovered a piece of me. That document wasn't just a piece of paper. It was my shield, my voice when no one wanted to listen to me, my moral and legal proof that I knew exactly what I was doing. And the time will come when this role will need to be shown. You'll see. I then began to drop small clues. Nothing direct. Small things. A comment about how the ladder is safer than ever, just to see Aaron's reaction. Or tell Emily that I thought about changing the beneficiary of the insurance, but I left it as it is. For now. Her face. Oh my God, if you saw it. Do you know that smile of someone who wants to look natural, but the eye betrays fear? That's that. I saw everything. Their every visit was recorded. Every change in tone. Every question disguised as concern. They were sure that I didn't know anything, that I was walking alone to the end they planned. Little did they know that I had already set up the whole stage, and that they were dancing in the center of it without realizing it. One night, Aaron came with a gift, a new railing for the top of the stairs. He said he worried about me slipping. I thanked him, in my usual way, but I made a point of commenting, looking him in the eye. "Funny, you care so much about this ladder, right? It even seems that he dreams of it." He laughed, a little embarrassed. I smiled back, and I kept one more note in my notebook. The truth is that there are moments in life when we don't scream, don't fight, just observe, and each observation is worth 1,000 words. And can I tell you something? From the bottom of my heart, there is still a part of this story that will turn everything upside down. You who are here with me until now, stay a little longer, because what I found out after that, not even in my worst nightmares would I have imagined. And the next visit I received, it didn't come from the family. It came from Justice, and she did not knock on the door in vain. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry at that moment, but I knew I needed to stay calm. Paul came to have a coffee with me, with that smile that tried to be warm, but that didn't swallow the hatred I already felt. He started talking about life, the weather, asking if I was taking care of myself, and I listened to every word with extra attention. But suddenly, he blurted out something, a seemingly innocent sentence, about a conversation that Emily commented on the other day, about how you were rearranging some things at home. My heart raced. How so? That was information that only Emily could have given. And there he was, without realizing it, proving that he was not just an accomplice. He was emotionally committed to the idea that my death would be something good for everybody. My stomach turned. I knew I couldn't let this thread slip away. I turned on the tape recorder hidden in my bag, and Bill would then analyze every nuance of his voice, every hesitation, every word that delivered the entire shot. That's when I realized, Paul didn't just want me dead. He wanted more. He planned to contest the old will, claiming to be a direct relative, hoping to secure a portion of the inheritance for himself, twice winning, first with my alleged disappearance, then with the legal dispute. I felt as if the ground had been torn out from under my feet, and it didn't stop there. Sarah, his wife, wasn't just looking from the outside. She had already consulted a lawyer in Colombia to secure her financial future, knowing everything, planning every step. That revelation made me cold. It wasn't just ordinary family betrayal. It was a meticulous, calculated erasure campaign. For a few minutes, I stood in the kitchen, holding the trembling mug of hot coffee in my hands, remembering the afternoons when Robert, my late husband, made the simplest things seem grand. The smell of coffee brought back memories of days I could never erase. of when Aaron was still running barefoot around the room, laughing with all the innocence in the world. I wondered, between one breath and another, how some memories have the power to mark us forever. They shape us, remind us of what we are capable of loving and what we are willing to protect. And, if you have a special moment inside your heart, a memory that still makes you smile or hurt, share it in the comments. Search your own chest of memories and tell me, even if it's just a line. Has it ever happened to you? Or do you know someone who has experienced something similar? Meanwhile, my mind worked fast. I needed to reorganize every piece of information, every recording, every suspicion. Bill and I began to put together a detailed scheme, connecting every visit, every conversation, every digital message, and suspicious phone call, trying to see the full picture of this web of betrayal. I knew that the next step would be delicate. One wrong move and I could lose all advantage, but every detail I discovered increased my determination. I felt a strength that came not only from anger, but from something deeper, the awareness that I had survived so long to live precisely this moment, to finally control my own history. And when I looked at the clock, I realized that the family's next visit would not be like the others. They were confident, thinking I didn't know anything. Little did they know that I already had their every step recorded, their every intention deciphered, every plan ready to be exposed. And I knew with icy clarity that the time to reveal all this truth was coming. But the question that kept hammering in my mind was the same one I leave to you. Are they prepared to face what they really did? Because when the truth hits, there will be no way to escape. That dinner started out like any I'd made with Aaron. A simple table, lit candles, the smell of his favorite dish, herbed roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and a fresh-from-the-oven apple cake. I smiled, calmly, as they walked through the front door, not suspecting what I knew, or rather, what I had already quietly planned. Aaron looked nervous, trying to hide any sign of apprehension, but his eyes didn't lie. Emily, always impeccable, in her light blue dress, pretended to be natural, but her smile did not reach the eyes. That was my moment to observe, and I did it with the patience of someone who has faced storms. I put the plate on the table, distributed the cutlery, and we served the meal. The initial silence was comfortable, but charged with unspoken tension. During the conversation, I casually remarked that I had recently reviewed my finances, mentioning that I was not worth much at the bank. The effect was immediate. Emily's gaze narrowed, and Aaron took a deeper breath than usual. There was no scandal. There were no direct confrontations, but their every reaction said everything I needed to know. Emily tried to disguise it, averting her eyes to dessert, while Aaron tried to smile, but the tightness in his jaw betrayed anxiety. I kept my smile light, as if we were only discussing the weather or a television show, but my hands mentally jotted down every gesture, every hesitation, every meaningless sentence. It was then that I let out a phrase, apparently innocent, but loaded with layers. Funny how our lives change when we start paying more attention. A dense silence fell on the table. None of them answered. The weight of what I had said hung in the air, invisible but present, and I felt the change in dynamics, as if the power had subtly passed into my hands. Their every move, every little exchange of glances between Aaron and Emily, was like a dance that I controlled. It wasn't explicit anger or revenge that I expressed. It was observation. It was silent strategy. Dinner continued with the same mechanical routine. Chewing, serving, cleaning the mouth with napkins. But inside my mind, the plan unfolded. I knew that every word, every gesture, every apparent smile was being interpreted by them as normality, and at the same time, I picked up subtle signs of fear, anticipation, doubt. The sensation was delicious and painful at the same time. I remembered every Sunday when Robert, my late husband, and I planned simple meals, as if they were celebrations. Every gesture they tried to manipulate or minimize today had been done with love. And now, love was transformed into a silent weapon. As I served the apple cake, I noticed Emily glancing down the aisle, as if checking something that shouldn't be there. Aaron, for his part, seemed to fight the urge to question me about something I already knew they were planning. Every pause in the conversation, every forced smile, was written down mentally. I was collecting evidence in real time, but in an almost imperceptible, almost invisible way. The feeling of control was strangely comforting, even in the midst of the pain of seeing her son and daughter-in-law show themselves fully in their cruel intentions. In the midst of this, a memory came to me strongly. The days when I helped Aaron with math lessons, the cold nights when we sat in the kitchen discussing college dreams, Christmases with little money but lots of love. All of this now contrasted with the coldness I saw in front of me, but it also gave me clarity. If I wanted justice, I needed to act with patience and precision, not with uncontrolled emotion. And while they talked about trivial matters, travel, or social engagements, I just smiled. That apparent calm, my controlled serenity, was stronger than any accusation. They didn't realize that I already had absolute control of the situation. And at that moment, I realized that the game had changed irrevocably. I was no longer just the mother who suffered in silence. I was a strategist, an observer, the owner of my own narrative. And it is exactly at this point that I want you to imagine with me. Have you ever felt that you had all the elements in your hands, but needed to wait for the right moment to act? Have you ever had to save your strength and just observe before revealing what you know? If so, leave a word in the comments that captures that feeling. I hope I controlled myself. I felt anything that resonates with you. Because just like me, sometimes patience is the most powerful weapon we have. But as dinner ended, the tension remained like an invisible thread between us. Emily's gaze met Aaron's a few times, as if they were trying to communicate something without using words, and I just smiled, calmly, letting their every gesture become proof. At the end, I got up calmly, picked up the plates gently, and said, "It's time for a coffee, don't you think?" They nodded, still uncomfortable, and we headed into the living room. And it was at that moment, as I placed the cups on the coffee table, that I realized something essential. Their next move would not be about money or inheritance, but about trying to manipulate me emotionally. And I was ready. I knew that when Aaron and Emily thought they were safe, the next move would be decisive. And the question that now hangs in the air, and that you will also want to discover is, how would I use this apparent calm and this apparent naivety to completely turn the tables on those who planned my destruction? Because what they thought was an innocent dinner would actually be the first act of a plan that no one would forget. Days after that silent dinner, I felt overcome by a clarity I had never experienced. The pain of betrayal was still present, but the anger had turned into determination. I sat down at my old desk, my heart pounding, and began to write a letter to Aaron. Not a letter of supplication, not a letter of tears or words begging for understanding. No, it was a calm, firm letter, full of dignity and authority that I had not felt for a long time. In careful lettering, I informed him that from that moment on, his name would no longer be the primary contact for any medical emergency of mine. It wasn't a punishment. It was just the realization that I needed to protect myself and protect my own emotional life from those who showed that they didn't respect it. The letter followed the same tone with Paul and Sarah, my brother and his wife, who had hitherto been involved, albeit indirectly, in the plot which I now knew to be premeditated. Every word I typed was measured. Every sentence had a strategic weight. I'm rearranging my documents, my contacts, and my health insurance in a way that reflects my own autonomy and security. I hope they understand and respect my decision. I knew they would interpret my words as an affront, but that was the intention. To cut the silent ties that bound me to the expectation of love and loyalty that I had already realized did not exist. The phone rang a few hours later, and I saw Emily's name on the screen. She spoke in a sweet, worried voice, faking the worry I knew I didn't feel. "Lorraine, honey, what's going on? Why did you make these decisions without consulting us?" I took a deep breath, feeling every muscle in my body relax with the newfound sense of control, and replied with almost cold calm, "Emily, I'm organizing my life before others try to organize for me." There was a silence on the other end of the line, and I could hear the contained breathing, the surprise, the discomfort. She tried to regain control, insisting, but my voice remained firm and unwavering. "Take care of your own business, my son," he concludes, hanging up the phone with a slight click that sounded like the ringing of a bell, announcing that a new phase had begun. No scream, no pleading, no explanation, just the silent realization that my time as a victim was over. I watched the city of Charleston through the kitchen window, with the sun seeping through the curtains and illuminating the room, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace mixed with power. The cut I had made was not only bureaucratic, it was symbolic. The freedom that came from refusing to be manipulated, from ending any emotional issues with those who had demonstrated that my love and sacrifice were only tools in their favor. Throughout the afternoon, I imagined Aaron trying to understand, trying to justify, maybe even trying to plan a reaction. But I knew, with the clarity that only years of pain and observation bring, that nothing he did would alter the fact that the decisions were mine, and authority over my own life was no longer for sale. Paul and Sarah would receive the news and react in kind, with shock, frustration, and false indignation, but no possibility of reversing my choices. Everything was meticulously calculated, but it seemed simple, natural, inevitable. I didn't need to explain. I didn't need to beg. I didn't need to justify my right to decide about my life. The feeling of cutting these emotional ties was addictive. Every contact removed, every document rearranged, every decision made in silence was an affirmation that finally, no one could subjugate me again. The day stretched on with a powerful silence in my home. Every sound, from the ticking of the clock to the rustling of leaves in the yard, seemed to reinforce the sense of inner achievement. And even as I made tea in the afternoon, I felt the weight of decades of sacrifice and pain being replaced by something completely different, an air of self-respect that I had never fully experienced. But at the same time, a premonition hung in the air. Aaron and Emily would not accept this break passively. I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that this newfound freedom would provoke an intense reaction from them. Perhaps manipulative, perhaps desperate, but definitely predictable. And it was at that moment that I understood an essential truth. The greatest victory was not only the official rupture, but the patience I would have to exercise to see the unfolding of what I knew would come. Every gesture, every phone call, every attempt to control them would be mentally recorded, kept as silent evidence for the right moment. The feeling of power, of absolute control over my own life, was mixed with the memory of the child I raised, the boy who was once my world, and the woman I became, capable of facing any betrayal without losing my composure. And as the sun disappeared behind the trees of West Ashley, I looked out over my quiet house and thought, if they believe this cutting is just a bureaucratic hurdle, they're mistaken. This is just the first part of a bigger plan, the first victory that no one saw coming, and one that will turn their every move into a mistake that they will pay dearly. But the question that now haunts me and excites me at the same time is, how will they react when they realize that the invisible thread that cuts through their plans is not just bureaucracy, but the strength of a woman who has finally decided to live for herself? Because I know, with the certainty of someone who has already survived a lot, that the next step will be decisive, and that the real battle is just beginning. In the days following my decision to cut ties and reorganize my life, something began to change in the air. And it wasn't just my quiet choices that had done it. Aaron began to appear more often, always with that studied smile, with that sweet tone of voice that had once comforted me, but now sounded to me like a desperate attempt to control the situation. He would come to my house in West Ashley, feigning concern, asking if I had slept well, if I had taken my medicines, if the attic stairs were steady. His every word was measured, calculated so that I would believe in his affection, but I felt, in every gesture, the disguised fear he tried to hide. Emily was not far behind. His messages arrived on my cell phone like small bombs of emotional manipulation. Long texts, full of false worry, questions about my well-being, about my finances, about plans that could make my life easier. I read each one of them with a serene smile, answering only with short, precise sentences, without giving myself away, without giving her anything she could use. Silence, at this point, became my most potent weapon, because what they didn't understand was that the calm of a woman who knows everything is much more frightening than any scream or direct confrontation. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. Enjoy this video and subscribe, and let's make this story reach those who need it. Paul, my brother, showed up one morning unannounced. He entered as if it were casual, but his eyes betrayed intent. She tried to strike up a conversation about domestic accidents, about the ladder that Robert, my late husband, had so carefully built, about the risks of growing old alone. I asked about my health, whether I was feeling dizzy or lack of energy, and each question seemed rehearsed to gauge my reactions. I just watched him, responding with monosyllables, letting the silence become an uncomfortable mirror. With every gesture, every question, every nervous look I noticed, the tension grew, and I could feel their fear seeping into the air. Bill, my old friend and retired detective, discreetly monitored his every move. He would tell me over the phone about the small signs of desperation that the conspirators showed. Glances exchanged, faster breaths, abrupt gestures, messages revised and rewritten several times. I listened attentively, feeling a strange, silent satisfaction, because finally they were losing control. That feeling of helplessness that had previously consumed me was now reversed. I didn't need to scream, nor beg for justice. It arrived silently, almost invisibly, but inescapably. Every visit from Aaron, every message from Emily, every appearance from Paul was a reminder that their plan could no longer come to fruition. I was 2 steps ahead, watching each desperate attempt at manipulation. Their despair was tangible, almost palpable, as if the air around the house had grown denser. The most fascinating thing was to see how people who considered themselves smart, cunning, confident in their evil plan, now trembled at the mere presence of a woman who refused to be manipulated. I could see Aaron mentally revising every word he would say, trying to adjust his tone. But the fear that I was paying attention to everything made him hesitate, making small mistakes. Emily, on the other hand, sent messages full of fake affection, but the urgency implied in each paragraph betrayed her panic. And Paul, always the most calculating, tried to maintain his posture, but the small gestures of impatience and anxiety gave away that he knew that time was no longer in his favor. Each visit from them made me more aware of my own strength, more certain that patience and silent observation were my greatest weapons. I could feel the tension building inside each of them, as if the whole house had turned into a stage where I dictated the rules without raising my voice. With each passing day, their fear became more apparent, and the strategy Bill and I had devised began to take effect. They were unsure, suspicious, unsure of what moves to take, not realizing that the web of evidence and observations I had set up made any attempt to carry out the plan all but impossible. At the same time, the experience taught me something precious. Silent strength is more impactful than any demonstration of anger or direct confrontation. Every gesture of mine, every calm look, every measured response, was a reminder that I was no longer a victim, and the sense of inner power, mixed with the memory of every night of sacrifice, every pie made, every hour of study paid for with my sweat and patience, was liberating. The transformation was complete. The woman who had once felt powerless now moved with precision, confidence, and control, letting the desperation of others be her indication that everything was working. But even with all this preparation, a doubt hung in the air, mixed with the silent adrenaline. To what extent would they try to manipulate, control, or even accelerate events? And what else could they do to try to reverse the advantage I had so carefully gained? I knew that their next move would be decisive, that every misstep could reveal the magnitude of the conspiracy, and that patience would be my greatest ally. Because in the end, what I needed was for their every action to give them away completely, for every attempt at intimidation to turn against them, revealing not only the truth, but also the extent of the evil they planned. And it was in this tension-laden silence that I understood something vital. They did not realize that they were at the mercy of a woman who had learned, the hard way, the art of patience, observation, and silent justice. Their fear was just the beginning, and I was ready to watch. From my calm and strategic point of view, each piece of this complex game moved exactly as I wanted. But an unsettling question accompanied me with every visit, every phone call, every message received. How would they react when they realized that, after all, I was completely aware of everything, and that there was nothing they could hide, no plan that could prosper? Because now their despair wasn't just evident, it was palpable, and I knew that at any moment, a new opportunity would arise to turn that fear into justice. In the days that followed, I realized that every detail of what I had experienced needed to be documented with surgical precision. I could no longer rely on memory alone. Every word, every gesture, every hint of betrayal had to be recorded so that no one could claim deception or confusion. With Bill by my side, we reviewed recordings, phone conversations, text messages, and even small slip-ups that Aaron and Emily made without realizing it. Each test felt heavier than the last, but also more liberating. For the first time, I felt that the truth had real weight in my hands. We discreetly installed cameras in strategic locations in the house, one facing the stairs, the other toward the front door, and Bill helped me organize a detailed dossier of dates, times, specific speeches, and suspicious behavior. It was impressive to see how the conspirators delighted in the expectation that I would remain defenseless, without realizing that their every action was being recorded. I even found myself smiling to myself, wondering how they would react when they realized that their plan was being dismantled step by step. At that moment, a phrase came to my mind and warmed my soul. Sometimes, silent patience is more powerful than any direct confrontation. She gave me the strength to continue. Knowing that justice alone would not be enough to satisfy my need for them to understand the gravity of their actions, I began to plan the next step. I wanted each of them to confront the truth face to face, with no possibility of excuses, no lies to protect their image. I quietly called an assistant district attorney in Charleston County, describing the situation carefully, without revealing names, but giving enough detail for him to understand the urgency. He immediately agreed to open an investigation under secrecy, understanding that we were dealing with a complex and dangerous plot. The feeling of having allies, even if discreet, gave me a security that I had not felt for decades. Each phone call made, each message sent to confirm dates or documents, made my heart beat faster, not of fear, but of determination. At the same time, I continued my routine as if nothing had changed. I prepared my meals, took care of the small chores around the house, talked to neighbors and friends as if everything was normal. Every gesture was designed not to arouse suspicion, but every watchful look, every silence observed, every measured sentence was a small weapon in the silent war I waged against Aaron, Emily, Paul, and Sarah. They had no idea that I was 2 steps ahead, that their every move was being analyzed and recorded. The sense of quiet power transformed me, and I began to feel that every tear, every sleepless night caring for Aaron, every sacrifice of so many years, now had an even greater purpose. As Bill arranged the dossier with meticulous precision, I reflected on everything that had happened since that afternoon, when I decided to hide in the car to surprise Aaron with a simple apple pie. I remembered the first lessons that life gave me. Trusting too much in the wrong people can be painful, but experience makes us stronger, more vigilant. And I realized that the time had come to transform this pain into justice. I wanted more than just to see the law act. He wanted them to feel, even for a moment, the depth of the betrayal they had committed. In the midst of all this preparation, there was a moment when I sat alone in the living room, with the open file in front of me, and I couldn't help but reflect on how much power some memories have. Every record, every word they said, every treacherous gesture was now documented, but the most impressive thing was to realize how these memories, however painful, gave me strength. I thought to myself, some memories don't just let us suffer, they shape us, make us capable of acting with wisdom and precision. If you have also kept memories that, in some way, taught you to be stronger, leave in the comments something special that marked your life. With everything in order, Bill and I began to lay out the logistics for the moment when the truth would rise complete. The idea was simple but impactful. Every piece of evidence gathered would be presented to the prosecutor, every recording revisited, every message authenticated, and after that, a public revelation. I wanted Aaron, Emily, Paul, and Sarah to understand that I was not only alive, but that I had followed their every step in silence, that patience and strategy had been my allies, and that every attempt to deceive me would backfire on them. As I thought about how everything would be, I felt a chill down my spine, mixed with the feeling of justice about to be done. I remembered every waking night, every silent tear, every moment I thought I was alone in the world. But now, the woman who had once felt powerless had become a full-fledged strategist. Every action, every calculated step, every camera installed, every record made, consolidated my position. I was no longer a victim. I was the center of my own story. And then, I realized something even more important. It wasn't just about exposing the conspiracy or seeking revenge. It was also an affirmation of my own existence, of my dignity, of the value of my sacrifice over so many years. They had underestimated a mother, an elderly woman, who still possessed intelligence, courage, and resilience. And as I watched the evidence lay before me, a question hung in the air. Would they ever have imagined that I would get this far without raising my voice, just using silence, patience, and strategy? With each detail revisited, I felt the anticipation growing. He knew that the decisive moment was near, that every thread of evidence, every piece of evidence gathered, every indirect witness, every recording captured, was about to converge into a confrontation that would be impossible to ignore. And deep down, a certainty emerged with force. The truth, when organized and presented with courage, has a devastating power. But the question that accompanied me night and day, as I waited for the right moment, continued to hammer in my mind. How would they react when they realized that their every move had been observed, every plan, every intention betrayed, every word recorded? Would they feel only fear, or would they finally understand the extent of the betrayal they had committed and the price they would have to pay? Because when the truth stands up complete, there is no hiding anything anymore, and I was about to show you just that. And so, as I closed the dossier and looked one last time at the silent room, I felt a mixture of anticipation and determination. The moment when my family would discover that I was alive, conscious, and observing every detail was approaching. And I knew that when the time came, their reaction would be as intense as the intensity of all the pain, all the injustice, and all the silent love I had accumulated over decades. Now the question that kept in my head was clear. Were they prepared to face the truth? Or would the shock of knowing that the mother they believed helpless had seen, heard, and recorded everything would be greater than they could bear? Because finally, the time of revelation was approaching, and nothing could prevent justice, silent and precise, from finally taking place. The morning when everything changed began with a deceptive calm. I woke up early, as always, feeling every heavy muscle and every heavy thought in my mind. He knew that day would be different, but he could not imagine what it would feel like to walk through those doors with the certainty that, finally, the truth would rise. Bill discreetly escorted me to the courthouse building in Charleston, ensuring that every detail was prepared for maximum impact. As soon as I walked into the lobby, I felt the weight of each year I had experienced, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the moments of fear, all converging in that instant. Aaron, Emily, Paul, and Sarah were there, unaware that fate would bring them face to face with the consequences of their own actions. Every look they gave when they saw me was a reflection of the incredulity, the fear, and perhaps the guilt they still didn't want to admit. The prosecutor opened the session with formality, but the air in the room was already charged with tension. As the recordings began to play, I felt a strange mixture of relief and indignation. Their cold voices, their laughter over my planned death, every detail of the accident they wanted to stage, resounded like sharp knives amid the silence of the audience. Aaron tried to stand up, swallow his words, seek my attention, perhaps in search of a last request for forgiveness or explanation, but I remained motionless, as a reflection of the serenity I had earned over weeks of planning. Emily tried to deny it, her voice trembling and desperate, but every word clashed with the irrefutable evidence that filled the room, each recording more devastating than the last. Paul, who until then had maintained a facade of control, began to stutter, his face red with anger and embarrassment. Sarah, realizing that there was no longer any escaping the truth, broke down in tears, trying to cover her face, unable to face what she had helped create. I kept my stance steady, not uttering a single word, allowing the silence to speak louder than any accusation I could utter. Their every gesture, every reaction, was a silent confirmation that patience, strategy, and observation had turned into a justice more powerful than I could have ever imagined. As I watched each expression, I felt a wave of emotion run through my body. Finally, all the manipulation, all the betrayal, all the fear I had carried for so long was before me, recorded, documented, and presented clearly and incontrovertibly. I remembered every night I thought I was alone, every silent tear shed on the sofa in the living room, every moment I felt helpless. And in that instant, I realized that all that pain had turned into something greater. The truth was standing, and I was alive to witness the moral collapse of those I once considered family. The prosecutor filed formal charges of conspiracy, attempted insurance fraud, and planning of premeditated murder. Each accusation was met with a visible shock on the faces of Aaron, Emily, Paul, and Sarah. The courtroom, which once seemed just a cold and formal space, turned into a stage where justice finally manifested itself in a clear and irrefutable way. The silence I maintained was my most powerful weapon. They couldn't intimidate me. They couldn't manipulate the narrative, because their every step had been recorded, every word captured, every intention revealed. In the middle of the hearing, as the recordings continued, I realized that I was not only witnessing their downfall, but also experiencing a moment of personal liberation. Every sentence he heard the prosecutor play from the recording served as a reminder that patience and intelligence could overcome decades of emotional abuse and betrayal. I sat firmly, looking straight ahead, feeling every second as an affirmation that life doesn't end when one is betrayed. On the contrary, it can be transformed when one learns to use one's own strength and wit. And then, something surprising happened. A wave of relief ran through the room when it became clear that justice was underway. The prosecutor looked at each of them firmly, pointing out that the evidence was not just circumstantial, it was complete, detailed, and indisputable. Aaron, who for years had behaved like an exemplary son in public, was now visibly defeated, his protective mask finally fallen. Emily tried to control her despair, but each attempt to minimize the situation clashed with the concrete reality presented before everyone. Paul and Sarah were unrecognizable, unable to hide the terror they felt when they realized that there was no more room for manipulation or denial. As the details of the recordings were read, I felt a mixture of relief and justice that warmed my soul. Every moment I had spent alone planning my defense, every silent and calculated action, had all led to this instant. I realized that patience, observation, and detailed preparation were not just strategies, they were instruments of survival and redemption. And the feeling of seeing those who had tried to destroy me being confronted with the truth was indescribable, a mixture of triumph, relief, and finally, inner peace. Deep down, a question persisted. Would they ever really understand the depth of the damage they had caused? Because while formal law took care of the consequences, there was an emotional justice that I had quietly constructed, the revelation that I was alive, that I had observed every plan, that I had kept my dignity and integrity intact. And this truth, perhaps more than any judicial sentence, would be the most devastating blow to their conscience. As the hearing drew to a close, the prosecutor made it clear that the charges would move forward, that a full investigation would be conducted, and that they would all face serious consequences. And even though I knew there would still be legal battles ahead, I felt a strength I hadn't felt in years, a sense of control, that every move now depended on me, that I had regained my power and my autonomy. The silence I had maintained throughout the process had spoken louder than any screaming, and the looks of disbelief and fear on the faces of Aaron, Emily, Paul, and Sarah confirmed it. As I walked out of court, accompanied by Bill, I realized that this day marked not only their downfall, but also my complete liberation. Every step I took to get there, from discovering the plan in the parking lot to meticulously recording evidence, had been rewarded with the most satisfying outcome I could imagine. But even with justice being meted out, one certainty remained firmly in my mind. The next step would be to show the world, publicly and incontrovertibly, who they really were, and how I survived it all. And so, as I breathed in the fresh air outside the courtroom, the question that accompanied me was clear. When I decide to reveal my own resurrection, and expose everything to those who needed to see the truth up close, how will they react? Would the impact of discovering that the mother they tried to eliminate was alive and aware of every detail be enough to finally break the facade they had maintained for so long? Because the moment of full revelation was approaching, and I knew it would be. Unforgettable. That morning started out unlike any other. I got up early, feeling a strange weight in my chest, but at the same time a lightness that I hadn't felt in years. The hearing was over, and for the first time since I discovered the betrayal, there were no more secrets, no hidden plans, no constant fear of what might happen. The city of Charleston was still breathing its quiet routine, but for me, every step I took through the streets was a silent reminder that justice had somehow manifested itself. Aaron was no longer at the law firm. Colleagues whispered about his departure, and I could feel the echo of his defeat in every murmur that reached my ears. Emily, with all her calculated coldness, now faced rejection from her own family, who did not want to get involved with someone capable of plotting against her own mother-in-law. Paul and Sarah dealt with unexpected debts, public humiliation, and financial investigations that they could no longer escape. I walked the streets of West Ashley almost like a ghost, watching the neighbors busy with their lives, the children playing in the park, the light wind swaying the leaves of the trees. Every detail seemed so simple, so normal, and yet it carried a deep meaning for me. I could feel the difference between living in fear and living in freedom. That silence I had cultivated for weeks turned into something powerful: peace. For the first time in years, I sat down to my morning coffee without looking over my shoulder, without anticipating unseen dangers, without measuring every word I said. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee seemed more intense, cozier, and the taste of the first bite of the homemade bread I prepared brought back memories of long, happy Sundays with Aaron before all the darkness invaded my life. And yet, a subtle pain still seeped into my heart. What hurt me most was not their fall, but the realization that they had chosen this path on their own. Every action, every wicked decision, every cruel plan had been devised unnecessarily, only by greed and contempt. I remembered the nights I spent awake caring for Aaron when he had a high fever. Those mornings I prepared his breakfast and school lunches, every gesture that would make any mother proud. And now, to see that these same people tried to erase all that, to plan my death, to manipulate my life and my assets, was almost surreal. But there was a silent justice that manifested itself in every consequence they faced. It was the justice of life, of morals, of karma itself, that fell on those who chose poison over love. As I walked back to my house, I passed the small cafe on the corner and saw familiar faces. Some were still whispering about the case, discreetly, but there was a restrained respect in their eyes. It was as if, without needing words, everyone knew that something profound had changed. I didn't have to prove anything to anyone, but I felt a quiet satisfaction in realizing that the truth, even when hidden, always finds a way. The streets of Charleston, which once seemed like just the scene of my routine, now carried layers of meaning, memories of fear, quiet strategies, and finally, the freedom that can only be earned by being true to oneself. Arriving home, I entered slowly, feeling the cold floor under my bare feet and the familiar smell that had accompanied me for years. I opened the windows and let the sun in, illuminating every corner of the room that had witnessed tears, fears, and endless nights of silent vigilance. I sat down at the kitchen table, and for the first time in a long time, I could feel every detail around me without fear overpowering me. The cup of coffee in my hand seemed to carry more than aroma and taste. It carried the victory of a rebuilt life, the weight of patience and intelligence used to overcome those who tried to destroy me. As I sipped my coffee, I thought about how cruel but also surprisingly fair life can be. Some may not believe it, but there is a silent strength that grows in those who have been betrayed, in those who have been underestimated, in those who have suffered in silence. It is a force that is not seen, not touched, but manifests itself at the right time, in a precise and definitive way. And I felt it in every step I took that day, in every look I cast at the streets and at my home, feeling their presence in every detail, but now without fear, just aware of what I had survived and what I had achieved. I looked out at the garden where I had planted small flowers in the spring, remembering the afternoons spent tending to Aaron, the conversations about school, the laughter, and the stories made up to calm loneliness. Now, each flower seemed like a silent reminder of the life I chose to live, the love I offered without expecting a return, and finally, the integrity I kept intact. Even in the face of the cruelest betrayal, I felt a deep sense of completeness. Peace came not from revenge, but from the clear conscience that I had done everything right, that every step I took had been guided by a love of life and truth. As I finished my coffee, I thought about the road ahead. The past still existed, and the memory of pain, disappointment, and attempted betrayal will never completely fade. But there was something more important now: the future. A future where I could live without fear, without the shadow of betrayal hanging over me, where each day would begin with the freedom to choose how to love, how to smile, how to simply exist without the need for constant vigilance. The city continued its rhythm. Neighbors greeted each other from afar. Children ran in the park, and I was there, alive, whole, and at peace. And as I pondered all this, a nagging question crossed my mind. Will they ever grasp the depth of the destruction they have caused? Or will they continue to be lost in their own ruins? Because for me, it was not just a matter of legal justice, but of conscience, of moral understanding, of facing the truth that they had tried to erase. The city commented discreetly. The local newspapers published about the case without sensationalism. But the lesson was clear. Actions have consequences, and the poison that is planted sooner or later returns to its own emissary. I sat down for a few more minutes, enjoying the absolute silence of my home, a silence that had once been feared and was now cherished. I took a deep breath and realized that I was finally free from the constant threat, emotional manipulation, and the weight of disloyalty. Every detail around me, every object, every memory carried a new meaning: survival, silent victory, and poetic justice. And at that moment, a certainty took hold in my heart. The peace I felt was not just a pause between events, but the beginning of a life truly mine, where the past served only as a guide, and the future was open to every choice I wanted to make. But as I contemplated all this, a subtle premonition accompanied me. What would I do with the freedom I had won? How would I transform all that painful experience into something that could inspire or protect others who, like me, have already suffered at the hands of those they should love and trust? I knew that even though the legal battle was won, life's journey would continue, and there were still stories to tell, lessons to share, and strengths to reveal. And so, as I finished my cup of coffee and looked up at the blue Charleston sky, a silent question remained. Will I ever be able to fully show the world the depth of all that I have lived through, and how the truth, however silent, can rise above any betrayal? Today, sitting on the porch of my small apartment on Sullivan's Island, with the smell of the sea streaming in through the window and the sun illuminating every detail of my renewed life, I feel a peace I never thought I'd feel again. The house in West Ashley was left behind, and along with it, the fear, the betrayal, and the shadow of those who once tried to erase me. Aaron, Emily, Paul, and Sarah faced the consequences of their choices, each dealing with their own fall, learning the hard way that the poison you plant always returns. I, in turn, gained something that no money or gesture could offer: restored freedom and dignity. Each morning, I walk slowly along the beach, feeling the cold sand on my feet, and I realize that living is not just about surviving. It is celebrating the simple fact of existing, of breathing, of choosing love and serenity over resentment. The great lesson that I take with me, and that I want to share, is simple and universal. No one can steal our essence if we keep our lucidity and our self-esteem intact. I learned that time, when used with patience and intelligence, transforms pain into strength, silence into power, and loneliness into self-knowledge. And it is in this spirit that I turn to you, who have accompanied me here. Thank you for being with me, for listening to my story, and for sharing these moments of emotion and reflection. Each like you leave is like a warm hug that warms my heart and supports this space. Each registration is an invitation to come back together for the next coffee, sitting and chatting like old friends. I really want to know where you are watching me from today, so leave the city in the comments so that we can build a community that recognizes and supports each other. And don't forget to ring the bell. That way you don't miss it when the coffee is brewed again and a new real story comes to touch us. And as I contemplate the horizon and listen to the waves breaking gently, I already feel curiosity pulsating for the next story. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story, and come with me to discover how life, even in the most treacherous hands, can turn into a lesson and rebirth. The journey continues, and the strength we keep within us is capable of taking us to places we never imagined.